Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. US President Donald Trump says that Ukraine should make a deal to end the war with Russia because Russia is a very big power and they're not. This after meeting Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Trump told President Volodymyr Zelensky that Putin offered to freeze front lines of Kyiv if ceded all of Donetsk, a key Russian target. This comes as France, Germany and the UK will host a call today with allies on the ongoing peace efforts over the war in Ukraine, as Germany says the US is ready to join security guarantees. Canada's PM Mark Carney praised Trump's role and promised more support, as Turkish President Erdogan says the summit added momentum. Israel says Gaza residents will be provided with tents and shelter equipment starting on Sunday as the IDF prepares to relocate them from combat zones to the south to ensure their safety. The move comes days after Israel announced plans for a new offensive, as 39 are reportedly killed in the enclave, according to local officials. Meanwhile, the US State Department says it is halting all visitor visas for individuals from Gaza while it conducts a full and thorough review. The department added that a small number of temporary medical humanitarian visas had been issued in recent days, but gave no figure. At least 340 people have died in northwestern Pakistan after 2 days of heavy rains and flash floods, that according to local officials. The deluge struck with lightning, landslides and cloudbursts in the deadliest downpour of this monsoon season, with more bodies missing. The Republican governors of 3 states are sending hundreds of National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. at President Donald Trump's request. The deployment comes after D.C. officials and the administration agreed to keep Mayor Muriel Bowser's police chief in charge. The Canadian government is moving to end a strike by Air Canada cabin crews and order binding arbitration, a step back by the airline but opposed by the union. Thousands of flight attendants walked off the job for the first time since 1985, forcing the cancellation of nearly all 700 daily flights. And Hurricane Erin, the first of the 2025 Atlantic season, has intensified into a catastrophic Category 5 storm, the US National Hurricane Center has said. Located 175 miles northeast of San Juan, Puerto Rico, Erin is sustaining maximum 160-mile-per-hour winds. But we start this hour as Russian President Vladimir Putin has told Kremlin officials that his Alaska visit was both useful and timely. He expressed respect for the US position and highlighted Russia's willingness to peacefully resolve the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, signaling possible flexibility on territorial claims. Let's have a look at what the Russian president had to say.
Попросил вас собраться для того, чтобы проинформировать о результатах нашего визита нашей делегации в Соединенные Штаты, на Аляску. Хочу сразу отметить, что визит был своевременным и весьма полезным. Мы поговорили практически по всем направлениям нашего взаимодействия, но прежде всего, конечно, говорили о возможном разрешении украинского кризиса на справедливой основе. И, конечно, у нас была возможность, что мы сделали, поговорить о генезисе, о причинах этого кризиса. И именно устранение этих первопричин должно быть положено в основу урегулирования. Мы давно напрямую не вели переговоров подобного рода на таком уровне. Повторяю еще раз, была возможность спокойно, детально еще раз изложить нашу позицию. Мы, разумеется, с уважением относимся и к позиции американской администрации, которая видит необходимость скорейшего прекращения боевых действий. Ну и мы тоже этого бы хотели. И хотели бы перейти к решению всех вопросов мирными средствами. Разговор был очень откровенным, содержательным. И, на мой взгляд, это приближает нас к нужным решениям.
Well, these comments come as in a powerful letter, First Lady Melania Trump appeals directly to President Putin, urging him to protect children's innocence and champion global peace. She calls on him to act decisively, saying true leadership lies in safeguarding every child's future beyond borders, politics and ideology. Meanwhile, following the Alaska summit, President Trump urged Ukraine to negotiate with Russia, calling Moscow a very big power. He told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that Putin proposed freezing front lines if Kyiv surrendered control of the strategically important Donetsk region. Zelensky said Russia refusing to accept a ceasefire was complicating efforts to end Moscow's more than 3-year-long conflict. He warns that if Moscow won't stop strikes, securing lasting coexistence with neighbours will be even harder. Well, this comes as Ukrainian forces pushed Russian troops back 2 kilometres on the Sumy front amid ongoing fighting near key villages. President Zelensky warns of increased Russian attacks ahead of critical peace talks. Well, in another update from Russia, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held separate talks with Turkish and Hungarian foreign ministers discussing the Alaska summit's outcome. He shared Moscow's perspective on the failed bid to end the Ukraine conflict. Well, a lot of developments, of course, in an extremely multifaceted discussion and talking point as world leaders look at how they can end this Russia-Ukraine conflict. And joining us to discuss that, retired Major General Gigi Doedi, a global strategic defence expert who joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. And let's first look at Donald Trump's comments. He says Russia is a big power, Ukraine is not, and that Ukraine needs to push a deal forward. But Ukraine have been strong in saying they won't concede any land, something that Russia seemingly is pushing for, and the US president now is joining him with. Do you think that this is the only way that the war will end?
Well, Joshua, first and foremost, always a pleasure to be on the NewsX World. Well, you asked a very specific question, and I can give very specific answers. First and foremost, I think this summit at Alaska marks a major step toward the resolution of the Ukraine-Russian conflict, which is on for last 3.5 years. And I think the stated positions are very clear. Firstly, Trump has emerged as a peace negotiator, and he has yielded certain amount of ground to President Putin, and President Putin has gained a fair deal both politically and also as far as the global, his standing is concerned. Now, what exactly has President Trump stated in this? First and foremost, I think President Trump has now adopted a position wherein it is a strategic in nature, not exactly the deal, because the deal will take some time to come through. But he has made some very important statement, which actually imply that Ukraine will have to yield a certain ground in case this peace deal is to materialize. That means certain giveaway of the territorial claims. Now, that is one statement which implies that the stronger power can always have better of a weaker opponent. Point number 2, what he has stated is that this deal will come with certain guarantees, means that the US could be involved in giving guarantee, security guarantee to Ukraine. The point number 3 is we also need to understand the larger dynamics, how Europe is playing it out, how the other countries are involved in it. But primarily, I think what it is going to be that in time to come, even Zelensky will be involved, because today, without Ukraine, the talks have no meaning, because Ukraine is the most affected party. So all I can say is the Trump administration or President Trump has made it clear how this negotiation or settlement can take place. That means certain amount of concession will have to be made by Ukraine, and also possibly Russia also could adopt a flexible position. But all the same, Mr. Trump will like to carry the European Union and others along with it before the deal can be actually made. And my last point is India is a beneficiary, because when there is a reduction of tension between Russia and US, then possibly India could escape the 25% extra tariffs, which is a good news for India.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you've mentioned European nations there. Before we touch on their response, let's briefly look at this letter from Melania Trump directed to President Putin and focusing on the theme of children alongside other points. Do you think that this letter is maybe more of a voice of reason than what Trump's rhetoric has been? And do you think it's trying to focus the conversation on the humanitarian aspect amidst so many diplomatic talks? Of course, there are deaths on the front lines, but also deaths being reported, civilian deaths on both sides.
Absolutely, Joshua. Ironically, in the war, it's the civilians who take the maximum hit because they are unprotected. While the armed forces have certain degree of protection, they have certain degree of, immunity because they are fighting on the front line. But the civilians are most exposed. And I think in this case, First Lady Melania's comment merit a deeper consideration because the children, the elderly, the women, are all actually the victims of the war. And this war, last 3.5 years, has caused about 1 million casualties, and a couple of 4 to 5 million people have been displaced. The point is that we need to always consider the humanitarian effect that war has, and this actually gets ignored because in the heat of the war. I think this call is very timely, and
Yes.
world must pay attention to this because humanitarian angle is very, very important because they are the ones who suffer the maximum. I think this also needs a high degree of consideration while the talks are on, but we need to also focus as to no further, victimization of the civilians take place, and this should be the highest priority. That means that there has to be a cessation of hostilities and reckless bombing of the civilian arenas. I think this should be highest priority. But all I can say, Joshua, is the steps in right direction. The Alaska summit comes at a very timely moment, and I'm sure this lays the groundwork for the further resolution of the conflict, which actually merits highest priority. Joshua.
Yes, absolutely. And retired Major General Gigi Dawedi, you will be staying with us as we now turn our attention to reactions to this summit and ongoing comments relating to this peace proposal and potential deal. The leaders of Britain, France and Germany are set to host a video call today involving Kyiv's allies in a coalition of the willing meeting to discuss steps towards peace in Ukraine, that according to the French presidency. The meeting, coordinated jointly by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, will come a day before Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky travels to Washington following this US-Russia summit in Alaska. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that the US is ready to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine and will not leave the responsibility to Europe alone. Merz also added that Trump had briefed the EU leaders on his talks with Putin and highlighted the US role as crucial in enforcing pressure on Russia. Let's take a closer look at what the German Chancellor said.
Und es stehen jetzt Sicherheitsgarantien im Raum. Also die Frage, wie man einen entsprechenden Friedensabschluss mit Russland sozusagen auf Dauer absichern kann. Und die gute Nachricht ist, Amerika ist bereit, sich an solchen Sicherheitsgarantien zu beteiligen, überlässt es nicht allein den Europäern, aber selbstverständlich, die Europäer müssen ihrerseits einen Beitrag dazu leisten, dass auf Dauer die Sicherheit der Ukraine gewährleistet ist. Das ist aus meiner Sicht selbstverständlich. Die Beteiligung der Amerikaner daran, die Bereitschaft zur Beteiligung ist eine gute Nachricht. Jetzt soll es weitere Gespräche geben am Montag in Washington zwischen Präsident Trump und Präsident Zelensky. Dann möglichst bald ein trilaterales Treffen, also mit den 3 Präsidenten Trump, Zelensky, Putin, um dann ein schnelles Abkommen herbeizuführen. Wenn das gelingt, ist das mehr wert als ein Waffenstillstand, der möglicherweise über Wochen andauert, ohne weitere Fortschritte in den politischen, diplomatischen Bemühungen. Einen Punkt, da hat Präsident Trump zu Recht darauf hingewiesen, Russland scheint bereit zu sein, entlang der sogenannten Kontaktlinie die Verhandlungen zu führen und nicht entlang der Verwaltungsgrenzen. Das ist ein gewaltiger Unterschied, denn Russland stellt Gebietsansprüche, die bis jetzt militärisch von Russland nicht besetzt worden sind. Das ist offensichtlich Gegenstand der Gespräche in der Nacht gewesen und die hat Putin nach den Worten von Präsident Trump zugestanden entlang der jetzigen des jetzigen Frontverlaufs.
Well, these comments come as Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney stated that Canada is coordinating closely with Ukrainian President Zelensky and partners in the coalition of the willing to intensify support for Ukraine. He also noted Trump's leadership in ending the war. This comes after the leaders of 8 Nordic Baltic nations, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway and Sweden, reiterated steadfast support for Ukraine, stressing that peace requires a ceasefire and security guarantees. They welcomed Trump's statement that the US will participate in security guarantees, while emphasising that Ukraine's armed forces should face no limitations. Well, thank you very much, retired Major General Gigi Dawedi, for staying with us. Of course, we brought live coverage of that summit in Alaska, and the key sort of note point there was the fact that not just Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was missing, but also there was no European representation. The guests that we spoke to on that night signified that Europe was being sidelined, potentially intentionally, but here Europe continuing to push their support. Do you think, Major General, that Ukraine are a key player in these peace negotiations, or is this support going unnoticed in the wider and bigger picture being held between Trump, Putin and potentially Zelensky?
Absolutely, Joshua. No doubt about it, no unquestionable that Ukraine is the key player because after all, they are the ones who are fighting the war. And without them, any peace agreement or any process is incomplete, or I would say unfair. And at the same time, I think Europe has very high stakes because they are the front-line state for facing Russia, and they can't have Putin have his way and have one-sided agreement because Putin still is under the delusion of Cold War, symmetry, and he has a vision of larger Russia or erstwhile Soviet Union, and his designs cannot be accepted because his design would mean seriously jeopardizing the security of Europe. So you are absolutely right that Zelensky is the key player. Ukraine has to be involved directly because they are in confrontation with Russia. And secondly, Europe also has high stakes because European security is directly dependent on how the deal goes. Because if deal goes in favor of Putin, then he will be emboldened, and that will jeopardize the security of European Union. So I feel that in this whole process, Ukraine and European Union has to be brought in. They cannot be sidelined because that means that's a one-sided process and which will not result in a fair deal. So I think European Union leaders are rightly voiced their concern, and they are backing up Zelensky wholeheartedly. And this will also imply that America has to be part of the guarantee because as Putin is dealing directly with President Trump, so it cannot be two people show. It has to be a collaborative effort in which Zelensky or Ukraine and European Union has to be involved so that the deal has certain degree of legality and certain degree of validity. Joshua.
Yes, absolutely. Retired Major General Gigi Dawedi. There are so many points for us to discuss, and I wish we had longer. We could take the whole programme talking about them, but of course we will continue to discuss these topics relating to comments from Canada, Turkey and other places as well throughout the day. But thank you very much, Major General, for your insights and your time. Let's now shift away from a European conflict to one in the Middle East. And Gaza's civil defence says that Israeli fire has killed 39 and wounded over 100 people near aid centres. Deaths in crowds near Gaza food points have become common, according to local authorities, with those groups blaming Israeli fire. The US and Israel has backed the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, now the main aid distributor in the enclave, and accuses Hamas of stirring unrest and firing on civilians. Israeli military says that Gaza residents will receive tents and shelter supplies from today before being moved from combat areas to safe zones in the south. This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that civilians would be evacuated to safe zones before the offensive, calling Gaza City Hamas's last stronghold. France's foreign ministry urged Israel on Saturday to scrap plans for thousands of new homes in the West Bank, calling it a serious violation of international law. A ministry spokesman said France strongly condemns Israel's plan to build 3,400 homes in a highly contested area of the occupied West Bank. Well, joining us to discuss both of these major talking points, Dr. Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo, Japan. As always, Dr. Nagao, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Let's first look at these comments from Israel, of course, in the wake of dozens of further deaths reported by the Gazan officials. Israel saying they're going to provide shelter for displaced Palestinians who are going to be told to move south ahead of an offensive in Gaza City. How do you think the world will react to this announcement?
When we checked seeds in the past, indeed, providing food is very difficult because amount of the food prepared outside of the Gaza and start to deliver, and so that's why the people can get. But this is war zone, so that's why even if the food is prepared, if they try to bring the food to the inside of the Gaza, how to deliver is very difficult because there is no transport system inside. Because this is war zone, too dangerous to transport. So, and the delivery system, everything has destroyed. So that's why which is a road, which is a building, very difficult to identify. So under such kind of situation, how to deliver food itself, we face a very tough situation. So recently, Israel tried to enter this area, and one by one they occupy, and making the corridor and start to deliver is, indeed, compared with the past, this is progress. Yes. So, but of course, originally this is a difficult job. So if too many people come to the same place, and it looks like the panic is happening, and try to make the law and order, and fire the gun, indeed, it could happen.
Yes,
so,
and Dr. Nagao, sorry to interject. Yeah. I'm conscious of how much time we have left, and I briefly want to touch on the announced West Bank expansion. Of course, France reacting. How do you see this move going down on the global table of discussion? Of course, disputed lands that Israel say that they're going to expand and settle into.
View from the situation from the outside, it looks like how to coexistence is matter peacefully. That is matter. But what happened in the history in this area is stronger power can get a place to live. That's what happened. So in the past, Israel has gone. Now Israel restores the country. And why? Because they have the power. So that's why the view from that situation, it is not easy to make the agreement and deliver the land for all of the people living this. So simply said, it is very difficult. So especially the mutual trust is needed, but trust was broken, especially after the October 7, 2023 terrorist attack. So that's why the view from the current situation, yes, without the trust, we cannot make something proper in this place.
Absolutely. Dr. Nagao, please do stay with us as we're going to move over to North America, but for a related development, as the United States has halted all visitor visas for people from Gaza. The State Department says a full review is underway. Officials confirmed only a small number of medical humanitarian visas have been issued in recent times. So far this year, Washington granted more than 3,800 visas to holders of Palestinian Authority travel documents. The move comes after Republican lawmakers called Palestinian entry a security risk. Pro-Palestine groups, including the Council on American Islamic Relations, have slammed the decision as intentional cruelty. Humanitarian organisations warn the ban will block wounded and sick children in Gaza from accessing life-saving medical treatment in the United States. Well, Dr. Nagao, thank you for staying with us again. We are shorter on time, but there is a debate here, of course. People clearly in need of medical support within Gaza. But US officials talking about a security risk. Is it the US's responsibility to be looking after these people in Gaza, given the fact that they have been a staunch supporter of Israel throughout their military activity?
Simply, there is a risk if the terrorist enters the United States, that is a big problem. So that's why to prevent this, they try to do that. Is in this it is understandable, but at the same time, the view from the people in Gaza, of course, they have the right, they have the human right that they want to say, and that is the truth also. But at the same time, the security is very important, especially recent age. And so America will not accept. This is also understandable, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Nagal, thank you ever so much, as always, for such a great insight on such a difficult topic. We will continue to monitor all of the situations on the ground in Gaza and diplomatically. But we stay in North America as the Canadian government has stepped in to end the strike by Air Canada flight attendants, which began just after midnight on Saturday, forcing Air Canada to cancel all 700 daily flights, affecting up to 130,000 passengers. Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu has asked the Federal Labour Board to impose binding arbitration, which would order an immediate end to the walkout. Let's listen to her closely.
After 8 months of negotiations and weeks of intensive mediation, Air Canada and the Canadian Union of Public Employees flight attendants were unable to reach a tentative agreement. The government firmly believes that the best deals are reached by the parties at the bargaining table, and we will never stop believing that. As Minister of Labour, I have exercised my authorities under Section 107 of the Canadian Labour Code to direct the Canada Industrial Relations Board to order the parties to resume and continue their operations and duties in order to secure industrial peace and protect the interests of Canada, Canadians, and the economy.
While the dispute centres on wages and compensation, Air Canada has offered a 38% increase over 4 years, with a 25% raise in the first year. The union says it falls short, though, arguing flight attendants deserve pay for time spent on the ground. Let's now listen into what some of the leaders of the Air Canada component of COOP have said on the issue.
What we're asking for is not unreasonable. It is not a high demand. It is not that far off other comparators such as Air Transat. It is realistic and it is deserved. We are the national carrier and we have people operating in poverty. Like, that's disgusting. That's very problematic. So the company needs to be willing to address those things. You can't go the status quo and say 8% is enough, 10% is enough. It's not. You're still leaving them behind.
We are heartbroken for our passengers. Nobody wants to see Canadians stranded or anxious about their travel plans. But we cannot.
Well, hundreds of cabin crew picketed at major airports, including Toronto, Montreal, Calgary and Vancouver, joined by pilots in solidarity. Union leaders say the current pay structure is so low that food banks have been opened for crew members. Meanwhile, passengers face travel chaos, with thousands stranded or forced to find alternative flights. Well, joining us to discuss this situation and provide some more context, Vandana Singh, an aviation expert, live on the programme with us. Vandana, always a pleasure to be speaking with you. Let's look at this action that the Canadian government is looking to impose. How exactly will they go about ending these strikes?
Thank you, Joshua. First and foremost, a pleasure to be on your show. And yes, looking at this has been a prolonged bargaining game that's been going on for 8 months. Was there some effective communication? Was there, a proper interface, discussion to the key issues, which is primarily pay, and rightfully so? Comparison with the, industry benchmarks, be it Air Transat, that we know has gone for an increase over 4 years with a compounded rate of interest at 30% until October 2027, or be it United Airlines at a 40% increase, with Delta, American Airlines, and nearby players following queue. Why did it take so long now that the Ministry of Labour has stepped in? Look at the loss of the cost of opportunity, or the cost of the loss of opportunity, if I can say so, because you have 130,000 passengers stranded daily. You have a loss of 54 million daily on the USD on the airline itself, 10,000 flight attendants. So imagine now, with the Ministry of Labour jumping in and rightfully so, because this has been going on for 8 months, that this be now quickly resolved. But when we talk about, to answer your question, quickly resolved, it will take minimum 7 to 10 days for rebooting, rescheduling, bringing everything, restarting online. And this is at the time of peak season with 25,000 passengers affected daily who are outside Canada, and about 130,000 in not being able to travel. Now look at the loss of the opportunity. So it's high time that the Ministry of Labour steps in and resolves this as soon as possible.
Yes, and Vandana, as we bring our discussion towards a conclusion, of course, you've mentioned the economic impact there, but also the impact on personal people, families who have been waiting potentially all year for this one holiday, and this action has come in. Whose responsibility is it to not just look at obviously supporting those people and providing compensation to the hundreds of thousands who have missed their holidays, but also looking at finding a quick solution?
Joshua, obviously the onus is on Air Canada. They could have done this properly, as I mentioned. So they could have spoken with the Canadian Union of the Public Employees. They could have had transparent discussions, got on to key issues, and they should have resolved it. So the onus is on Air Canada, but of course, now with the government stepping in, the Ministry of Labour stepping in and saying, look, it's high time that this be resolved, then it's Air Canada that has to bear this brunt, because they should have solved this prior. And now it's peak season. They can't put passengers on the Star Alliance, which is they're a member of Star Alliance. They can't push passengers on United Airlines, etc., Lufthansa, because they're already so full. So obviously, the compensation, the entire refunding, the rescheduling, all of the onus is entirely on Air Canada, Joshua. They are there. They've been sitting on it for 8 months. They could have resolved it better. And I agree, 8% is no deal. They could have seen the industry standard benchmark. They could have seen where exactly the annual salaries or the monthly salaries or the hourly salaries, as we say, $28 an hour is nothing. They could have come to a solution and resolved it quicker. So onus is on them, Joshua.
Vandana Singh, as always, thank you ever so much for such great insight on that topic. We will, of course, continue to monitor all discussions surrounding these strikes. But for now, that is all we have time for. Stay tuned for more of the latest updates from across the world. Thank you.